Have you ever been so badly hurt by someone that the thought of getting even felt completely justified? Not just justified, but right. I have. And I want to talk about that today because I've been reading a book called Unpacking Forgiveness by a man called Chris Brauns. And something in chapters 11 and 12 stopped me dead in my tracks, man, because it put into words something I've lived with but I never really had or been able to fully articulate what it is that I felt. But so many years ago, my marriage ended, and I'll be straight with you, man. It was the single most painful experience of my entire life. Nothing before it and nothing since it has even come close to the pain that I felt, right? And in the middle of that pain, like there was this anger that came, and not just sadness, man, not just grief, a burning, consuming sense of injustice. And I knew that something, was deeply wrong. You know what I mean? And I had this thing in my heart, like someone should answer for this, this is not fair sort of thing. And in that space, it was sort of raw, as exposed. I had a temptation to do something that was, sort of overwhelming, if you want to call it that. But when I read this book, Bronze, he points out this thing, and I think it's so important. People tend to think of revenge as dramatic or violent or something that you see in a movie or something like that. But he describes what he calls garden variety revenge, and the everyday kind that most of us are actually tempted by. And when I read his list, I recognized all these things and myself in this list. He talks about a spouse who's hurt and withholds affection and gives the silent treatment. We've all experienced that if you've been married. A person who's wronged, by someone at church, or burns up the phone, making sure everyone knows their version of the events that took place and paints this narrative. A boss that could be harsh to employees who talk viciously about him behind his back, or a father who disciplines his son, not to teach him, but because he resents the inconvenience, that his son caused him, in those sort of moments. All these things on the list, right? Small things, quiet things, things that feel like justice in the moment, so to speak, And I felt that injustice when I went through my marriage breakup, and I went through that period of time in my life. Man, that sense of injustice was brutal, because I grew up in a family where you don't quit on the person that you commit to for a lifelong partnership. Both sets of my grandparents were, married longer than 65 years. Two of those grandparents are still alive. My parents, they faced major challenges over the years in their marriage, and as many people do, couples do, you know what I mean? But the thing is that they stuck together and they worked it through. They didn't just walk away when it got hard, sort of thing. And so that's what I'd grown up around. I'd grown up around being around people that stick it out. But that wasn't my sort of story, you know what I mean? And so it was very hard to take in those moments that I felt, And this book says every single one of these is sin, it's not a mistake, not a gray area. It's sin, And the reason why is Paul writes in Romans chapter 12, 3 times in 3 different ways. He says, repay no one evil for evil. Never avenge yourselves, and do not be overcome by evil. So it's 3 times, because Paul knew how deeply revenge is wired into us as humans. He knew it needed to be said more than once. And I want us to understand who the Apostle Paul was writing to. These weren't people having like minor disagreements with their neighbors, man. You know, Brauns points out that the book of Romans was written to Christians who would face some of the most horrific kinds of violence imaginable in their time period. You know, I'm talking about real suffering, like real injustice, not fake suffering or fake injustice, you know. And Paul still said, no revenge, take no revenge. And here's what Chris was saying, you know, about that. And why, you know, this is the line that got me, you know, when I thought about this in my own story. When you pursue revenge, you're basically telling God he cannot do his job. And man, that was hard to take when I thought about it. That's not just a sin against the person you're retaliating against. Really, it's a statement of unbelief. And I had to really think about that. I had to think about, okay, if I'm wanting to rise up in taking revenge against a person who's wronged me or betrayed me or who doesn't even care, right? And I'm taking that, you know, I'm seizing that autonomy for myself, right? Then I'm taking that out of God's hand instead of giving it to him and going, like, if I carry this, God, then it's going to break me. At some point down the line, it's going to break me. I'm not saying not to feel. I'm not saying not to be angry and all these different things and feel emotions. And I'm not saying emotions and feelings are the enemy. But if we stay in that for a long period of time, it only does damage to our heart and our mind over a long period of time. And so that's why, you know, Chris in his book was using this novel. It's called A Time to Kill, to illustrate how compelling, you know, the cases for revenge can feel. A father's 10-year-old daughter is brutally attacked. He finds out who did it. He buys a gun and kills them. And Chris says, honestly, that he emotionally understands that father, like, thinking completely, because every time he reads those pages, like he was like, I am that father. I would be the same way, sort of thing. But understanding the emotion doesn't make the action of what that father did right. And Chris makes this observation that I think is really important for those of us dealing with the quieter, everyday version of betrayal or someone wronging you, you know. He describes revenge like a hurricane. You know, it starts with small wins of injustice that hit you, real or even just perceived, right? One small act of revenge leads to another. Each rotation picks up speed before a long, full-scale storm has formed. More people get sucked in, more damage is done, and the people you thought you were protecting often end up hurt by the fallout of that. And I've seen that cycle. And I'm sure many of you have seen that too, you know, in what it is that you faced. But this is a thing that nobody tells you, right? Or told me, you know. The person that takes revenge rarely feels better. The wound is still there. They've just added guilt and chaos on top of it. Now, I'll be honest with you about my own experience here. I wanted to, but I didn't take revenge after my marriage ended. There's so many things that crossed my mind when I went through that. But that was not some great sort of spiritual achievement, if you want to call it that, on my part. There were moments I wanted to, moments I came very close. And here's the part that might surprise you. I still get triggered today, even now. There are moments where the injustice of it all, out of nowhere, comes and I have to make the same choice all over again. This is not a one-time decision. It's like a choice you keep making over time. And sometimes you get periods where you have to choose. You got to choose to say, you know what, I can't go there. I need to give this over to the Lord, you know? So the question is when you feel that, what do you actually do with it? You know? In this book, like, it was very clear, and not taking revenge is actually the best route to take. It does not mean you are okay with what happened. It does not mean that you're pretending it didn't hurt or it doesn't still hurt now. It does not mean that you are letting the person or letting the situation off the hook. You know what I mean? What it means is you're deciding in yourself that you're not going to be the one who administers the justice, because God said that's his role. And in Romans 12:19, it says it plainly. It says, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. And Chris sort of anchors this in his book, you know, from Deuteronomy 32, where Moses encouraged Israel to rest in the truth that God will make sure that justice is done. Not might, but will. Big difference. And then he says something that I found really, really sobering when I read it. He talked about the reality of God's eternal judgment, that those who have done wrong and never repented, and one day, you know, like us all, we all have to stand before God, and justice is perfect and complete at that time. He says, and he shudders even writing that sentence in the book, that the reality of hell is nearly unthinkable, but that this truth, as sobering as it is actually what frees us from the need to take revenge for ourselves, because God, he'll take that ultimate revenge. When you really believe that God's justice is coming, like completely and perfectly, eternally, then you can begin to release the grip. That grip that we want to hold on to that situation. We want to hold on to those things that have happened, you know? That's not a feeling. Some days it doesn't feel like anything, but it becomes a choice. It's a decision to believe something true, even when your emotions are pulling in the opposite direction, you know? And I had to make that choice. I had to make that choice. And as I said, I still have to make that choice at times. That God sees all things. He determines, you know, what takes place. He determines whether the justice happens in this life or it happens in eternity, but that it's not something that I need to carry around with me to make me foul in my heart, to make me foul, you know, in my mind, and be close to people. And you got these walls up because someone wronged you years prior, and you just don't know how to trust again. You know what I mean? And that's why God is so good. That's why his grace is so good. That's why his mercy, it says his mercy is new every morning, you know? And so let me close with this, you know. Chris opens up, you know, in chapter 11 with a quote from Revelation 6:10, and it says, the souls of the martyrs crying out to God, how long before you judge and avenge our blood? So even the martyrs are waiting on God's justice, not taking it into their own hands, but instead they're waiting, they're trusting. So if you're like me and you were sitting with that burning sense of injustice right now, and you felt like something wrong happened and nobody is fixing it, and it feels like the situation never gets fixed, I want to say to you two things. First, you're right. Something wrong did happen. Don't let anyone rush you past that or minimize it. The pain is real. The injustice is real. And God is not asking you to pretend otherwise. And the second thing, the answer is not revenge. Not big revenge, not small, quiet, garden variety revenge. Not the kind that makes headlines and not the kind that nobody ever sees. The answer, the only answer, is trusting that God sees exactly what you see and that his justice will be infinitely more complete than anything we could ever administer ourselves. You don't have to fix it. I don't have to fix it. You can put it down. I can put it down. That's my question to you. What is those things that have been holding you back in your life that were never yours to carry in the first place? And maybe you might need to sit with that and you might need to think that through, right? What am I carrying that's not mine to carry? What can I choose to pray and give over to God, those things, right? I've said this in previous videos, like Jesus says, come to me all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. God says, come to me. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Jesus is saying, I want you to yoke to me and be yoked to me your whole life. I don't want you to carry the things that you can't carry. I want you to let me carry them. And in that exchange of you giving to me all those things, the betrayal, the hurt, the injustice, the pain, everything that a person's been through, that we go through in life, Jesus goes, in that exchange, when you give it to me and you don't carry it anymore, you make a choice not to carry it anymore, it says that he will give you rest. I don't know about you, but I want that feeling of rest. I want that peace in my soul. I want that ache to leave. Do you know what I'm saying? So if that resonated with you, hit me in the comments, like this video, subscribe to my channel. This channel is all about where pain meets people's second chances. And my hope is that these videos spark that encouragement in your heart. It sparks that thinking through of these things so that you don't have to remain in a place of pain, that there is hope, that there is justice, that there is peace, that there is joy, that there is mercy for the stuff that we've been through. And it's all found in Jesus.